I don't care if you call me racist. Okay, I'm racist. This is a problem according to who? Why should I ever relax around you? Why should I not cross the street? They can't create anything. They just eat and vomit filth like worms. They do. Look at my history. I don't care if it hurts your feelings. I don't care that there are things that were said and done in the history of my people that hurt your feelings. I come from a people that accomplished and invented and conquered and built amazing things. And you have nothing to compare to that. Nothing. And it really is a shame that 90% of you make the other 10% being generous, make the other 10% look bad. I value my free speech more than I value any of you, any of your lives, even, frankly. You know, I'd be dropping them right now in this video if it weren't for YouTube's community guidelines. Of course, when one of our guys goes unhinged and does something horrifically terrible, it will be so terrible in direct proportion to the fact that we tend to be good at taking people out. When you live in a country that you say is white supremacist, if only. Yeah, I'm National Socialist. I don't really expect everyone to get on board with, forceful measures don't really require everyone to get on board with it. If you follow, if blacks killed 458 whites and whites killed 84 blacks, like, we should almost be sorry for allowing them to look bad by comparison, Like, maybe we should be beefing the numbers up just to offset it so they don't look so horrible. You can't vote your way out of a problem like this. You know what I mean? Especially not when these people also vote. You can't vote your way out of it. So what are you gonna do? Something's gotta give. Now, I'm not advocating violence, but look, something's gotta give. That's all.
This is a change of pace from my last video, where we covered the truth of meritocracy. Link in description below. The goal of this channel is to create a shared understanding of the world. That exists in the positive and the negative. What do I mean? Well, positively, I put forth theory on truth, right? So like I did with the other video I posted. Negatively, though, I have to respond when people are actively tearing down our shared understanding of the world. The clips you just heard were not edited. They were from the YouTube channel Shameless Sperg, who I will now kindly refer to as SS, so aptly abbreviated. In this video, I set out to prove that his version of truth is no more than rebranded racism packaged behind the facade of statistics improperly presented. I was hesitant to publish this video at first due to the backlash it could generate, but I can't ignore the blatant use of misconstrued information to justify racist and prejudicial beliefs. When we get to the end and look at the comments of this video, we can highlight the problem this creates and the broader purpose of this response. But let me take a second. I'm speaking to you right now, SS fans. I have no ideological backing. My channel is not political, and I don't treat SS as a political demagogue. At the end of the day, we're just two men putting forth their notions of the world. I don't expect to change your mind. I can't. No one else can but you. I'm simply here to offer a different perspective. If you're going to subscribe to the beliefs I list in this video from SS, so be it. That's your right. However, if I was staking my identity, which is what we do when we assert a belief about the world to others, even if it's online, I would want to be damn sure I'm right. Now, let's get back to the video. I will be directly replaying his words, so there is no misconstruing. Let's begin.
The 2024 numbers are that black people killed 458 white people, white people killed 84 black people, okay? Now, the United States is 13.7% black, as many of you know, no doubt, and 58.4% white. That's a painful number. So that means that blacks are 23 times more likely to kill a white person than whites are to kill a black person.
SS starts off his video by citing some data. He states that the 2024, and I'm speaking in quotations here for a reason, numbers show that 458 white people were killed by black people, and 84 black people were killed by white people. He then uses this to conclude that, therefore, a white person is 24 times more likely to be killed by a black person than a white person. Let's break down why this is not just false, but dangerous. Firstly, this data doesn't exist. I searched for a long time trying to figure out where this data came from, and I couldn't find it from a single reputable source. This data, which is purportedly from 2024, is odd because the most recent Uniform Crime Report data is from 2019, which is sort of the gold standard in homicide reporting because it takes information from all of the different crime databases, so state, local, county. I would love to hear where SS got this data from, but I have a feeling that this is simply just self-updated tracker information on a website, which, of course, is not rigorously examined for truth. But even if we were to take him at his word, right, and so we steelman the position, it still doesn't justify it. Here's why. The number he's generating is done by taking the per capita rates of violence per race. So, for example, if there are around 44 million black people and 197 million white people, which is from the US Census data, you would take 458 divided by 49 million, and you take 84 and you divide it by 197 million. And the differential rate you'd get is 24.4 per 100,000 people. So call it a day, right? Clearly, you're 24 times more likely to die if you're a white person by a black person, so run away. Well, not quite. The issue with this presentation is that it fails to grasp the difference between absolute risk and relative risk. Before we get into those terms, let's introduce an analogy to simplify. Gothamopolis. This is our imaginary world, and I want you to think about a city where there are 100 knife wielders, who will abbreviate as KW, and 20 gun wielders, who will abbreviate as GW. Now, the 100 knife wielders in this scenario are the white people, and the 20 gun wielders in this scenario are the black people. So the knife wielders killed one gun wielder in the last year, and in that same year, 5 knife wielders were killed by the gun wielders. With that analogy, and keeping that in mind, let's take a look at absolute risk. There is a chance something happens to you at all, right? That's what absolute risk is. The equation you use is the number of events divided by the population at risk. So let's go back to our example with the knife wielders and the gun wielders to better explain absolute risk. There are 5 knife wielders killed and 100 knife wielders. So the absolute risk is 1 out of 20, or a 5% chance of being killed by a knife wielder as a gun wielder. There is 1 knife wielder who was killed by 20 gun wielders. So the absolute risk, again, is 1 out of 20, or a 5% chance of a gun wielder being killed by a knife wielder. Notice it's exactly the same, right? The actual risk, or the absolute risk that you have when you go outside every year, is a 5% chance of being killed, regardless if you're a gun wielder or a knife wielder. And the same is true of SS's data. Let's break down absolute risk in his information. Again, it's the same calculation, number of events divided by population at risk. So we take the 459 white people that were killed, and we divide it by the population, 197 million, at which point you get 0.000232%. So you have a 1 in 431,000 chance as a white person to be killed by a black person. Now, same thing for black people. Take that 84, divide it by the black population, 49 million, and you get 0.000171%. So you have a 1 in 584,000 chance in a given year of being killed as a black person by a white person. Why does this matter? Well, your odds of being killed by either race in this world, right, we're not in Gothamopolis anymore, is astronomically low. Here's some comparisons to show you just how unlikely it is. Dying in a car accident, your odds are 1 in 8,300. From falling, 1 in 16,000. Accidental drowning, 1 in 110,000. Accidental fire, 1 in 203,000. And a white person being killed by a black person, 1 in 431,000. If you took all 4 of those incidents, you're more likely to have that happen to you than being killed as a white person by a black person. Are you afraid of driving, swimming, cooking with heat, going up the stairs? This is in stark contrast, of course, to the bold claim posited by SS. Right? He makes the claim that you shouldn't let your guard down as a white person around black people. With his logic, you should avoid cars, swimming, using heat, and climbing stairs too. What he's saying is, statistically, it's just not a reality. But let's look at relative risk, because this is essentially what he uses. Again, going back to our analogy with the gun wielders and knife wielders, you would find that you take 1 out of 100, because 1 knife wielder died, to get a risk of 0.01. And for the gun wielders, you would take 5 and divide it by 20. Right? They killed 5 knife wielders, and there are 20 of them, so 0.25. You take those two, you compare it. It means that a gun wielder is 25 times more likely to kill a knife wielder than vice versa. This is what SS uses to make his point. But if you're paying attention, you can see how this is clearly flawed. Relative risk doesn't tell you anything about the likelihood of something happening. It's just the relationship between two data sets. So if the numbers are extremely low, as is case with the real data between black people and white people, your risk is completely negligible. To explain this, let's use bees. So in America, 100 humans on average are killed every year by bees. We don't kill bees, right? We don't set out and murder bees. Sure, they die from environmental degradation and other causes, but we don't kill bees like the way bees kill humans. So are we way more likely to die by bees than vice versa? And we should be terrified of bees? No, of course not. The actual risk, the absolute risk per encounter, is astronomically low. The deaths are clustered around people with severe allergies. The odds of a random person being stung to death are microscopic. Relative risk is comparison between groups. It doesn't tell you how you should view an individual person or interact with a group. Speaking of interacting with a group, it's important to understand another reason why SS's claims are just not valid. Interracial versus intraracial crime. There are way more white offenders than black offenders. Again, using his logic, we should be scared of white people in encounters, not black people. If you're white, you should be terrified of other white people. Look at the UCR data that I have listed on the screen. 69.4% of all individuals arrested nationwide were white. Only 26.6% were black or African American. Whites, 59% of arrests for violent crimes. Black people, 26.1%. Again, using SS's logic, why would you not cross the street if you saw a white person? Because statistically, you're more likely to run into them. Well, it's because that's not how we think, and that's not how we live. We don't just look at, percentages and decide that, every white person I see on the street, or every black person I see on the street, I should run away. It's illogical. But here's the thing. You may look at one of these statistics, which is murder, and you'll notice that black or African Americans actually commit more percentages of the distribution than white people. This is the classic 13%, 51% that certain individuals of certain groups love to bring out. But here's what isn't known. And this is a compounding reason, again, why SS's claims about fear are overstated. It's not black on white crime. It's black on black crime. And this is a point that SS later admits as a reason why black people are dangerous. Again, illogically, but the gut check here is that this is also true for white people. If you look at the data, white people kill more white people than black people. Black people kill more black people than white people. The question isn't why, should you be afraid of black people? It's why is intraracial, so crime going inside your race, so prevalent? Well, here's why. Violence is not random. The vast majority of intraracial crime is caused by either our family, our close friends, or friends and acquaintances. The amount of people that are being killed by strangers of any race is very low compared to the vast majority, again, of people who die. So why does this matter? Well, it highlights the falsehoods of SS's statements. You should not avoid black people on the street because you're 24 times more likely to be killed by them. We've already disputed that by the fact that relative risk, which is what that 24 times number is irrelevant to your actual risk in real life. We then disprove it further by showing that, white people actually commit more crime. And finally, with this point, we show that actually you're not even likely to be killed by someone you don't know. This is intuitively true as well. People don't mess with other people, generally speaking, that have nothing to do with them. In the vast majority of circumstances, the ones that do are the outliers, not the majority. The exception, not the rule, that SS proposes. His claims are nothing but stoking fear in people's minds. It's not based in reality. There is no menacing black man out there to kill you. You're more likely to be killed by your own race than the race of another.
Against us, the way they treat one against someone, say George Floyd, the national and international headlines just simply would never stop.
This next point that SS makes is both statistically untrue and ignores American history. First of all, again, his data is self-reported. So if he believes that it's true his murders numbers are real, well, then aren't they by definition being reported? Even beyond that, white victims for the vast majority of American history were the only things that were reported. Considering the fact that black people weren't considered humans and were property, it's clear to understand why people take black victimization seriously. And with that being said, white victimization is still, to this day, 2025, overreported, and black victimization is still underreported. Instead of the anecdotes that SS uses, let's look at an actual study. Stanford researchers looked at one of the deadliest years in Chicago, 2016, and they analyzed the news coverage of the deaths. There were 2,245 news articles about homicide victims. They found that 35% of murder victims in a majority white neighborhood are likely to be covered as a complex person, about double that of victims in black majority neighborhoods. 450 more words of text on average were used for white people than those killed in majority black neighborhoods. Researchers even found that black victims' names were often misspelled. Looking directly, though, at the number of articles, there were 3.8 articles for white victims and 2.8 articles for black victims. What does this say? Well, it directly contradicts his statement that white crimes are underreported, and black crimes are overreported. It's just not true. And on the point of George Floyd, how many white people have you seen murdered on the street in broad daylight by the police? It just doesn't happen. Again, it harkens back to injustices perpetrated by the police in the past. That's the reason why it blew up. Not because white lives don't matter or there's some conspiracy to minimize white deaths. It's overreported. Black people are overrepresented in crime reporting compared to actual arrests, and this was looking at New York. They found that black people were 20% overrepresented in TV reports based on their actual crimes. And that's just for murder. For assault, it was 30%. The same is shown in LA. They found that black people had a 16% overrepresentation when it came to arrest rates versus how often they showed up in the TV, whereas white people had a 7% differential in the opposite way, meaning that they're 7% less likely to be reported in the news based on arrests. So again, not only are white crimes underreported, black crimes are overreported. Not only are white deaths overreported, black deaths are underreported. This is in stark contrast to the inflammatory claims that SS made about George Floyd and white deaths.
Why should I ever relax around you? Why should I not cross the street? Why should I not, pick up and leave town, white flight? Why should I not keep to myself? I have to live this life and make accurate threat assessment.
And this is the issue. This is fearmongering of the highest order, using falsely gathered and presented data. When your goal is to share information that will be used by others to justify their vitriol, I just refuse to stay silent. People can and do get hurt over the beliefs shared by individuals like SS, those that refuse to enlighten themselves, either unknowingly or intentionally, to the truth. Bigotry of this order has no place in civilized discourse, and it just needs to be called out when it's seen for what it is: false. The statement of, "Why should I relax around you?" What kind of message do you think that tells people? It says, be afraid, because they are coming to kill you. What is a reasonable response to a threat if you think it's going to happen? Violence. This has been the history of the KKK, lynching mobs, Jim Crow, and hate crimes. It comes from fear and a lack of understanding. And that's the problem when you present data like this as SS does.
Math here says, remember, when they call you racist, it means won't let me murder you. Wherever you go on earth, they will follow you, beg and cry like spoiled children to be allowed into your country. And as soon as you're foolish enough to say yes, they go straight to work, taking away everything you need to survive. Culture? You don't have culture. That's why we need to take it away and replace it with wobbling. I can't even read that. Wobbling rectums and child-loving. Jobs? You don't need jobs. You have white privilege. Physical safety? I guess getting stabbed in the heart is what you get for not dying even sooner. How rude of you. Anything you need, they will try to take it away from you so that you die off and they grow like mold on the wealth that they could never in a trillion years create. How true is that?
So this is generally disturbing. I'm not sure if Homath is talking about just black people here, but it's clear that SS is. Understanding that he's not joking as well. We will go through the rest of this section, and it's pretty clear that he really does believe this. On the black people follow point, newsflash, slaves did not follow the colonists here. They were forcibly enslaved. I don't need to explain this, but it wasn't a voluntary following or begging like Homath says and SS reaffirms. On the wealth point, SS says, how true is that? Who do you think created the wealth? The slaves. They built America. Literally. They never could build on their own because their population was stolen by your forefathers. If you don't believe that, in a second, I'm going to show you the evidence as to why that claim is true.
They can't create anything. They just eat and vomit filth like worms. They do.
Eat and vomit filth like worms. SS says that they do. I wonder why people have prejudiced thoughts about black people. Maybe it's not because they're these scary criminals, but it's because people like SS spout beliefs like this, that they are worms that produce nothing. Well, here's the evidence for how black people contributed to the creation of this nation. George Washington Carver invented crop rotation methods for peanuts and sweet potato products. He was born a slave. Garrett Morgan, who invented the 3-position traffic light and gas masks, whose parents were both enslaved. Annie Malone and Madam C.J. Walker created hair products, which were critical for black female health. They were daughters of slaves. Dr. Patricia Bath revolutionized cataract treatment devices. Granville T. Woods, who created the railway telegraphy. He only had education until he was 10 years old. Elijah McCoy, the automatic lubricator for steam engines. He escaped from slavery. What does this show? Well, it definitely doesn't show the claim that SS is saying, which is that black people contributed nothing. They contributed amazing things in unbelievably difficult circumstances. I don't know how many of you could escape slavery and then go on to produce something like this, but I can tell you what, it's a whole lot harder than just being the slave owner. And why do you think there are less black inventors now? It's because of discrimination. Less access to education, less resources, less legal help, no generational wealth to draw on. A major factor in inventing things is capital and resources to expend on the project. The generational wealth gap plays a huge role in that, as well as the lack of connections like others that white people have. I will get into the data of generational wealth gaps shortly. But first, let's address the claim of who created wealth in America. By the 1850s, cotton was the most valuable export in the U.S., and eventually it accounted for 60% of U.S. export earnings. And who do you think produced all that cotton? Black and African American slaves. They fueled not only Southern wealth, but also the textile mills, the global trade markets, and financial institutions. Major U.S. banks, including J.P. Morgan Chase, used and profited off slaving. They issued loans to slaveholders to allow using enslaved people as collateral. The buying and selling of enslaved people helped finance infrastructure, railroads, ports, and Wall Street. Enslaved labor also built the White House, the Capitol building, early roads, railroads, canals, particularly in the South. Again, this idea that black people didn't contribute anything to the founding of this nation is not only ignorant, it's false. And is another reason why SS's claims are simply spouting nonsense.
You're just trying to divide us. They're trying to divide us. They're not trying to divide us, okay? That's not the thing. You can't divide what was never actually united. Don't you get that? We were never truly united to them. What we were was forcibly integrated with them. That's not the same as an actual unity. And then for that matter, my Confederate forefathers wanted nothing to do with this damned Yankee Union.
In his vitriol, he actually said a true statement. Forced integration didn't work. And it didn't work because people like him and many others refused to accept it. The attempts made to connect and reconcile the hatred of the past, a unity, was consistently rejected by prejudiced individuals. And, you know, what the great thing is, we don't have to be bound by the past. We can accept integration, unlike those who came before us and caused many of the issues we see in society today. Just a point to add here, he clearly is for the Confederacy, and if it was for his will, their policies, including slavery, would still be here today. Not much more to say on that point.
The other thing, even if we were united, here's what's being said. White people are evil and everyone else is good. And telling, telling everyone else, like, look, you're good and all white people are evil. And that's not divide and conquer, okay? That's kill Whitey. You know,
I challenge SS to posit serious intellectual figures that say this. If this were true, why are prominent anti-racist figures white, like Dr. Robin DiAngelo and Tim Wise? Why are protests against racism filled with non-black people? It's because when black scholars, activists, or everyday people criticize systems like white supremacy, structural racism, or historical injustice, they are critiquing systems and ideologies, not making blanket statements about all white people. Here's an example. Saying systemic racism disadvantages black people isn't the same as saying all white people are evil, like SS claims. It's pointing out how historical and present-day institutions have perpetuated inequality. This narrative he's pushing, demonizing an entire race and making blanket statements like we should never let our guard down around them, is something that he acknowledges how bad it is. But he can't take the next logical step and see how what he's doing is the same thing he's criticizing.
You know, when they call you racist, it means won't let me murder you.
This is just pushing the narrative that black people are actively trying to murder white people. If you say it enough times, people are going to start to believe it. If people believe it, what are they going to do in response? Just like I quoted in the beginning of this video, something's got to give. And it ends in violence.
And it ties into like their whole talking point. They're always saying it's not enough to not be racist; you have to be actively anti-racist. And then when you try to get them to define that, they list out for you a number of like racial and cultural Marxist ideas. And like, you know, you either get on board with this cultural and racial Marxist platform, or else you're racist and bad. So they make it impossible to escape, and they try to corner you into like you have to become an activist for our cause actively. It's not enough to be not racist. The very end of the road with being an ally is that you're a useful idiot and you're the first one up against the wall. I mean, that's just it.
If you knew that every night in your hometown, a group of its members would go around and kidnap a person from a random family and then kill them, is it enough to say that, well, I just won't participate? Obviously, you shouldn't stop at just non-participation. If you believe in it's an injustice, you should actively work to change it. That's the whole point of anti-racism, is to be actively against racist dogma, not simply to stand by with something you allegedly disagree with. Of course, in SS's case, he literally admits to being racist, so the point might be lost there. But ultimately, this is building on the whole issue with his content. It's adding fuel to the fire by saying that there are cultural Marxists out there, whatever that means, that will kill you at the end of the day. That black people have the goal of eliminating all white people. What narrative does this feed? Well, I'll tell you. 1, you should be afraid of black people. They will kill you just for being white. 2, you can't work to help them. They'll kill you also. So what's your option? Violence.
You know, I've seen things, and this says it well. It's just like racism will not go away until there are no more white bodies for it to infect. That's about as close to honesty as you're going to get out of them. Some of them still trying to play the game like, no, we're just talking about the social construct of whiteness. But then they start to blur lines and everything, and you get the idea that like, no, you view it as one and the same. You know, that this whiteness is just a natural outcome of the white people, and that if you want to get rid of whiteness, you have to get rid of white bodies.
On the flip side of what SS just said, Mississippi Senator James K. Vardaman said, if it is necessary, every in the state will be lynched, it will be done to maintain white supremacy. I mean, this is kind of a blatant example of the kind of statements that were made and are similarly pushed by someone like SS. Now, in the statement he made, right, the idea that racism won't go away until there are no more white bodies to infect, this is not like a real statement. He could be trying to refer to someone like Noel Ignatieff, who was saying things like, the key to solving the social problem of racism is to abolish the white race. But that's not a literal call to kill white people. What he's saying is that the social category of whiteness as a system of power and privilege should be abolished, not the people classified as white. Obviously, he advocated for dismantling white supremacy as a social structure, not for violence or extermination. In his own words, when I say abolish the white race, I mean abolish the privileges attached to it. This kind of language was intentionally provocative to challenge people to think about how racial categories are socially constructed and used to maintain inequality. Compare this to what SS said Again, I challenge him to show me a prominent scholar calling for the execution of all white people, but it just doesn't exist.
When did we all agree that this was like the ultimate blasphemy, you know, to admit racial differences, to have a preference for your own race, and to sometimes make fun of other races? Or to set up, you know, territories, countries for yourself, meant for the prosperity and well-being of your offspring and future generations. Of course, you're trying to set them up for success. Of course you are.
But SS, you're not just acknowledging racial differences and stating that you have a preference for your own. You are actively demonizing black people and saying white people should be terrified of them. Here's my response to the previous point that I said 2 points ago. Let's take SS's rhetoric to its logical end. What happens if white people want to have an in-group preferences and set up their own society? Well, they have to remove the people already there and keep others out. Well, America has a history of that, so I guess maybe that won't be too hard. But how do they do that nowadays? I'll give you a hint. It's violence. You don't have to imagine it. Learn the history of Reconstruction and Jim Crow and the KKK. It's already happened. His claim about setting up white people misses the point that white people are already set up for future generations. Again, it's called generational wealth. This is my evidence for generational wealth and the canyon that exists between white people and black people. According to the Federal Reserve's 2022 survey of consumer finances, median wealth of white families was $284,310. Compare that to the median wealth of black families, a meager $44,890. That means on average, white families hold 6.3 times more wealth than black families. And this is a statistic that ranges back from our inception. Why? Well, who owns the wealth after slavery was abolished? White people, who kept that wealth in the hands of white people. White people, through Jim Crow, through segregation. And those things still exist today. You can't argue it doesn't. I just showed you the data. Well, let's look at the white home ownership rate. This is from 2011 to 2021 from the National Association of Realtors. White families had about 73% home ownership rates. Black families, 44%. This gap has barely budged since the 1986 Fair Housing Act, and home ownership remains the single largest asset for most U.S. families. So white people don't need to do anything to maintain some sort of advantage, like SS says. They already have it. It's like they have a privilege due to their racial history that gives them an advantage. It's like white privilege. It's not a dirty word. It doesn't even mean that you're a bad person. No one seriously engages in discourse and says that. It's an acknowledgement of the cold, hard data. That's all it is. What you do with it is what anti-racism is an example of. Not murder all white people because they have white privilege.
Square one, except the black will get to start from square three. You know, maybe the white guy he'll be on square one, but they'll tell him you can't take off yet. For 5 seconds, you got to let Shaniqua over here get a head start. It's completely ridiculous, and they get so upset because they can't create these kinds of conditions for themselves. So they get upset that we're doing it, and then we're like hogging into ourselves.
Again, I just have to highlight the data we just looked at. Advancements in racial reconciliation, or the scary word DEI, doesn't mean that black people start ahead of whites. It's that they start, ideally, at an equal position, because they were already behind before the race even began. Generational wealth, home ownership gaps, they play a huge role in your start in life. If you want to learn more about that, look at the video I uploaded a week ago about the myth of meritocracy. White people have a large advantage in that area. So it's not as if we're moving white people back behind the starting line and black people ahead of the starting line, but we're trying to move white people closer to the middle, just like we're trying to move black people there. Equalizing the playing field is not hurting white people and taking spots away from deserving individuals. It's trying to have a fair and just society.
Really what they call this racism, it was really just white primacy. You know, establish a nation, you build it up, and you want to take care of your future generations. You want them to be more prosperous. You want them to have things you didn't have. You want them to be able to sit under the shade of the trees that you planted, obviously. This is treated as something, evil now.
But wait a second. Whose nations? SS says establish a nation. But was America a pure white nation? No. African American slaves always existed. It is comical that he says, sit under the tree you planted, when black slaves planted those trees. They supported the economy. Go back in this video, we talked about that. Provided labor to build the streets and to build the industries that supported white wealth. He's so close. If he just took that logic and applied it to all the people that built this nation, wanting to benefit from it, he might see why what he's saying is wrong. Why is it not just for an African American descendant to also want to have their children sit under the seeds and the trees of what they planted?
You certainly have one too. It's called egalitarianism. It's called gay race communism. That's what we have.
I'll just leave that one there for you, a little Easter egg. I have no idea what gay race communism is, but as you remember in the intro, he does admit that he is a National Socialist, so it does make sense that he would hate the communists.
And we are told, like, you're so violent, you know, look at all them school shooters. Of course, when one of our guys goes unhinged and does something horrifically terrible, it will be so terrible in direct proportion to the fact that we tend to be good at taking people out when we want to, in large numbers. That's not a boast, it's just not really surprising. Like, if we're going to go do that, of course, you're going to end up with probably like a high count. All right, it's going to be an absolute bloodbath. Horrible.
To not get right into his insanity, remember his language of our guys? That's the type of language that I'm talking about, which causes division. Why not look at a school shooter as a human being who did something terrible and evil? Why segregate it by race? The elephant of the clip, of course, is the fact that he's almost proud of the white capacity for killing, that white people can cause violence on mass scales if they want to. What is that signal to his audience? And who do you think that should scare?
When they go and do it, it's more often, like, black people, they have more incidents at school than we do, but they tend to be on a smaller scale, maybe 2 or 3 people, you know, if they manage to aim.
The first part of SS's claim here is actually true. The majority of single or interpersonal gun shootings at schools are primarily black, about 58%, with it being 28% white. However, this moves the goalpost from the fact that white people kill in mass and indiscriminate ways the vast majority of the time. More importantly, this obfuscates the fact that school shootings, whether large or small, are a major issue in the country. Blaming black people for having some, more small shootings isn't going to fix that, and it certainly doesn't prove anything about the content of their character. But of course, sort of proving my point here that he doesn't actually care about this issue, he throws in, quote, if they can aim, end quote. I wonder what that's a dog whistle for. Black incompetence? Black inferiority? His colors aren't exactly hidden here. They've been clear throughout this video. SS is a blatant racist who advocates for white superiority and racial segregation. He wants white people to fear black people, and he wants them to think that black people are going to kill all white people to drive fear and control, and to push a narrative of violence.
We shouldn't wave it away. Word in the reverse, we would never, ever, ever hear the end of it. But we're dealing with people that don't understand per capita, so there you have it.
Ironically, it's you, SS, who doesn't understand statistics and per capita. Per capita is not a tool for everyday risk factors, which is how you use it. Black people don't kill the most white people. White people kill the most white people.
You can't vote your way out of a problem like this. You know what I mean? Especially not when these people also vote. You can't vote your way out of it. So what are you going to do? Something's got to give. Now, I'm not advocating violence, but look, something's got to give. That's all.
Except SS, you are advocating violence. What does it mean, something's got to give? It's clearly a dog whistle. Hell, just a whistle for violence. Let's think of this hypothetical. I take out a gun, I point it at you, and I say, man, I wonder what would happen if I shot you. Don't worry, I won't. But just what would happen if I did? But don't worry, I won't. You would rightfully think, I'm going to shoot you. His implication here is clear. It's not obscure. The whole point of his video is to be afraid and to use that fear because something's got to give. I wonder what that is.
And to achieve equitable outcomes, I mean, guys, they're making it sound like we should be getting our numbers up. Now, I'm not saying we should, okay? I'm not saying that. But they really make it sound like we should, with all this talk of equity. I mean, if blacks killed 458 whites and whites killed 84 blacks, like, we should almost be sorry for allowing them to look bad by comparison, you know? Like maybe we should be beefing the numbers up just to offset it so they don't look so horrible. Shame on us. Shame on us. Always keeping them down.
No, SS. Shame on you. There it is again. The advocation for violence. If I said, I'm not saying you should steal, but doesn't that PS5 look good? But don't steal it. But like, is it even that bad? Everyone steals. What is that saying? If you repeat it enough, with everything else I've covered, it's clear what he means. This is the danger. While one man on his own is benign, his ideas spread to a group, well, it can quickly burn into a wildfire. SS has blown up. His channel is quite large, and he's gathered a large gathering. Quickly. The people he's speaking to share his views and represent many more who have yet to find his content. Here are some of those voices. I can't understand why so many people find it so hard to understand they hate us. 650,000 white men died freeing a bunch of permanent, violent toddlers. It's too risky to trust any of them. Who wants to try and figure out which 1 out of 20 is the good one? Avoid whenever and wherever possible. 1 in 20? Try 1 in 20,000, if even that. For every Thomas Sowell, there's thousands of Jamals walking around. I'm starting to think to understand why Americans had segregation back in the day. Also, why the trees had strange fruit. And if you don't know what that means, it's, I can't even call it a dog whistle, but it's referring to the hanging and lynching of African Americans. Jim Crow was for our protection. They have no empathy. The more you look for it, the more you see its absence. They are primitives. Pit bulls and golden retrievers are both dogs, but that doesn't mean that they are the same. It's analogous to people. We are nothing like Tyrone and Shaniqua. Absolutely. We are nothing like these creatures. We've been accepting the gaslighting and ignoring our own intuition for long enough. You ain't seen nothing yet. They need us. We don't need them. We are not the same species. Since I was a kid, I just felt like this about them. Like they're Homo erectus, and we're something else. Wrong, we're Homo sapiens or something. When the shit hits the fan, your skin will be your uniform. Let's get to it then. One thing to note about these comments is the creator heart you could see from SS. You can't say these are fringe individuals. Not only are his comment sections filled with these messages, and these messages have tons of likes, he is endorsing them. He stated in his videos that he doesn't read the comments that much until recently, and in those, he hearts the comments. The point of this section wasn't to demonize any particular commenter. You know, people will say, well, why do you even care what some loonies think about in their trailer parks? Well, these people don't just think racist things. They're brazen enough to comment on them online, and thousands of people are liking and replying with affirmation. This is by no means the entire internet. There are many more people out there who think similar, if not more extreme things. And no, this is YouTube we're talking about. This isn't 4chan. This isn't some, obscure messaging board. This is one of the more forward-facing social media platforms. And if they're showing up here, I mean, what is the scope that we're talking about here? Truth is a social belief system. If enough people say something and say it's true, it's their truth. If enough people say that white people should be afraid of black people, people will say that it's true. You are 24 times more likely to be killed by a black person than a white person, so be afraid. Using fear as a tactic of thought control is a tale as old as time, because it's extremely effective. This comment section is essentially an echo chamber. SS as a figure is a problem, and his audience is the purpose of making this video. If SS watches this, or doesn't for that matter, and decides to keep making content, he will, and that's his right. The point of this video is not to hate on SS, it's to address his community. The part that agrees with him, but maybe there's a part of them that's also open-minded. Open to hearing thoughts and evaluating them for their merit. If this video shifted your mindset or perspective, then I've accomplished my goal. I held views that make me cringe now. Views that I fundamentally disagree with. And that's okay. Growth starts by planting a seed. Truth is not born instantaneously, but it is a compounding concept, meticulously planted, watered, and protected. Forging a shared understanding requires that we are willing to question our preconceived notions and beliefs, to step together into the darkness of uncertainty and curiosity. If you listen to this video, my job is done. The seed is planted. It is now up to you to decide if you're going to keep an open mind or constantly weed out the plants that sprout from that seed. To SS, if you're listening, I hold no ill will against you. I see a version of myself in you. A version twisted by circumstance and the wrong ideas. I see the collective knowledge that has been passed into you. I see how tired you are. You state it constantly, but it's in your tone. You have a voice. You have a community. Please, consider what I've said and use it for truth. You can always turn the car around. You can always choose to pursue truth and justice. To my community, thank you for your continued support. I'm planning on getting back to a positive groove soon, and I have some cool stuff in the works, so stay tuned. As I stated earlier, all of the sources to this article and studies which I cited are easily available in the links below in the description. This video, as you can hopefully tell, was not an easy feat. This is a one-person show, and while I love doing this, I would also appreciate any support you're willing to give. The funds would be for getting a better mic, getting better editing software, and being able to devote more time to this channel. Regardless of that, please take a second to like, comment, subscribe to help push out this message to more people. If you really like it, share it to your friends and to communities that you think would appreciate it. Until next time.